Welcome, everyone. We're doing a webinar today on disability and claims management with Darcy. The reason we were 1 minute late was that his camera wasn't working. And of course, he got it figured out just now. So he's back with a new dress shirt. Looks fantastic. So like normal, we're going to do a webinar today, and we are going to do, Darcy is going to give a presentation, and then we're going to open it up for a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, send them our way, and we will get to them at the end. So Darcy, let's pass it over to you, and you can work your magic and talk about disability and claims management.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. And thank you, Sony, behind the scenes. Welcome, everybody, to the webinar on disability and claims management. This is an exciting topic because I know for a lot of you, it's one of the most often asked questions we get from our clients on a day-to-day basis is questions about accommodation, about medical, all those different things that we've talked about in prior webinars, one specifically around medical. And we do have a slide on medical, which I'm going to zip through, and it's really a recap. But really what this is about is it's really about the key concepts of actually running an important or an effective, begging your pardon, disability management program. So, and we're going to give you a great offer at the end of it. So hopefully everyone can see this. If no one can see it, tell me. I'm just going to get into presenter mode. I don't need another IT difficulty thing today. So I'm not having a lot of luck with the IT thing in my end, but I think we're looking good. Awesome. So again, 15, 20 minutes. We're going to zip through this presentation. We're going to talk about disability management, claims handling. We already have a bunch of questions already in the queue in advance. So if you do have questions in the course of this webinar, because your mics are muted, please do put them in the queue. We're going to try to get to them all. We never do, but we'll do our best to do our best. So really quickly, this is what we're going to be touching on today. So effective disability management, just a couple of slides, again, 15 to 20 minutes, super high end. And then we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls you need to be aware of when you're talking about disability management and claims management. Disability and claims management are similar. They're the same thing. For me, disability management is about making sure the employee gets back to work healthy and safe. Claims management, on the other hand, is the skill, and it is a skill, it's an art of doing that, getting that worker back to work safely and early, but at the same time, quickly and cost effectively. That's the difference between most people that do claims management or disability management and then claims management, where you could actually make it effective from a cost value point of view. And then the medical slide, it's a slide from our last webinar that we discussed in webinar. If we our medical, if we have some time, I'll run through it. If we don't, then I'll just skim through it, but it's in the presentation for you to see, which will all be sent out to you after. And then of course we have an amazing offer on the end and our live Q&A, which hopefully should be 40 to 45 minutes. So let's jump right in. Key steps regarding disability management. So these are the steps in a typical disability management program that you really need to have in place. It's more detailed than you think if you want to make it coherent, if you want to make it effective, if you want to make it a cost driver or cost savings for your company. Now keep this in mind for those HR people on the phone. HR is always looking at how we can add value besides the intangible. Obviously, HR does a lot of things that doesn't have a dollar sign on it, and intangibly that adds value to our corporation. Disability management is something where you can see tangible costs come back to your employer, provided you do it appropriately. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you have a system in place and be ready to go. And this is so important. Ready to go the moment the employee indicates that they're going to be going off work. That's super important. And then further to that, if you're going to be starting, if you don't have a disability management or disability process already in place, and you're starting it up and you're using this webinar as a nexus, which is great, that's what we're here for, then you really need to take stock. You need to make a list. Excel, Google, whatever it is that you need to do, you need to make a list of all the people that are on disability or any type of leave, whether it be protected leave, workers' compensation, sick leave, medical leave, what have you, whatever type of leave they're on, you need to make a list of where they're at, where, what their prognosis is, when you're expecting them back, when's the last time you touch base with them, when's the next time you're going to touch base with them. All these different things have to happen. You can't start a disability management program without having that in place out of the gate. Super important. Acquire, if anybody has ever been to one of our webinars, and I know we have a lot of people that come back and we appreciate you, but I'm going to say this over and over again, probably in this webinar a few hundred times, acquire appropriate and satisfactory medical at the beginning of the leave, not a week later, not 2 weeks later, the day they call you up and say, I'm going on a leave of absence for whatever reason, acquire appropriate satisfactory. And for protected leaves like maternity leave or childcare leave or anything of that nature, you're entitled to medical for those as well. Not all companies do it, and I get that, but you are entitled to it. In those protected leave kind of cases, not as important, but when you're talking about medical leave or workers' compensation, WSIB is maybe in Ontario, stupid important, like really important. And it's important that you maintain required claim protocols. So whenever process you have, make sure you lay it out that whoever it is that's in charge of all of this, and it should be one person, we'll get to that, whoever it is should be contacting at the point of being notified that someone's going on a leave. They should be in touch with them. 24 hours later, they should be in touch with them. And then no less than every 2 weeks thereafter, they should be in touch with them. It should never be more than that. If you are not doing that as an employer, then you are leaving the employee in a position of power and you're putting yourself in a position of liability, and you're never going to get that worker back. And if you do, it's not going to be as fast as it could, which costs you money, which is why this is a win-win for HR people and business people. This is a webinar that anybody who spends a lot of money in absenteeism and lost time needs to be attending. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. Adopt a centralized claim intake and manager system. Super important that, in a lot of clients, and I get it, especially for our bigger clients, we'll see like 4 or 5 different people that are running the claims management aspect of it, running the disability management thing of it. You see duplicate claims, you see overlap, you see things getting lost, you don't see the consistent messaging, which by the way could be another liability problem by itself. It's super important that you have one person or one department who's in line running everything from the intake of claims to the management of claims to the settlement of claims, right? It's super important that you run all that. And that should be all claims. I know a lot of companies like to set out workers' compensation. They set it separate from long-term disability and sickness and medical and protected leaves. And I get it. I get it. When I first started in government, when I went there, I was a claim specialist. That's what I did. That's how I started out. And my job was to take the $375,000 they were spending in workplace claims and get it down to less than $100,000, which I did within 2 years, right? Then they had the epiphany, if I could do that for workplace safety, maybe I could do it for other types of absences and what have you. And that's what I did. If we just started there, if we just started in a place where all leaves of absence were under one department, one process, one synchro, like one synchro, it's like, how much money can you, like, think about it from your perspective in your capacity for your employer? How much money can you save your employer? How good can you look in your HR function, right? So it's super important that if you have multifacets of claims management and disability management all over the place, you might want to consider, I strongly suggest it, but you might want to consider reeling it in and bringing it into one umbrella. Determine the path the employee absence will take. So this is important in so much as that you have to make a call out of the gate. And now a lot of this is going to depend on how long the leave is going to be, what type of insurances you have. Like, do you have a short-term benefit provider? Do you have a long-term benefit provider? Is this person going to be eligible for EI? Is this in fact, like you see this with harassment and workplace stress right now? This is our biggest question when we're talking about defining the type of leave. This person came to us, they claimed harassment, they said it was at work. Is this, and they're going on a leave of absence because they have a medical note. Is this a workplace claim or is this a non-workplace claim? These are the things you need to figure out of the gate. One, because you can't manage the claim properly if not. You can manage the claim down one path and then 2 weeks later get a note from the WSIB or workers' compensation saying they've submitted a Form 7 and now you're out of luck. Right now, everything you've done for the last 2 weeks is not only void, but you've actually put yourself behind the proverbial 8 ball, because now you have to go back and get caught up and, justify the reason you didn't report a workplace incident to workers' comp or WSIB. So it's really important. And the other aspect of that, it's a dual-edged sword, and the other side of the sword is actually not a bad one. This is an opportunity. You have to see disability management as an opportunity. Getting all this information is information you can use to help the employee. When an employee goes on a medical leave or goes on a parental leave or goes on a maternity leave or any of the protected leaves, they're eligible in most cases if they have the hours of work and all that kind of jazz. They're eligible for employment insurance in most cases, even if you don't have short-term disability or long-term disability, but especially short-term disability. They'll need help. Not most employees, good employees that are not doing this because they can or doing this because they're frequent flyers, they're doing this because a misfortune hit them. The best thing you can do for your company culture is to get the information that they need and jump in there and help them and be an advocate for your employee, while at the same time getting the cooperation and buy-in that gets them back to work early, which saves your company money. So that's super important. And then, of course, when you've done all of that and you finally got them to the point where they're ready to come back to work, if you already don't have an accommodation plan or a return to workplace plan in place, that's problematic. Right? You don't accommodations and return to work is so specific to the circumstance. There's no way you can write, there's no template out there, nor would I ever recommend one, or there's no policy out there that can cover every single circumstance as they come. It's unforeseen, it's case by case. However, there are processes that you can put in place where we say, okay, we're going to get the medical. We're going to evaluate what opportunities are available. We're going to look at timelines and all these different things, all these processes. And when they come into place and you plug in the medical information and the information from the employee, you can just plug it in and you're set and ready to go. These things can't be done when it's ready to happen, because every day you leave them out there and not accommodating them or returning to work, the longer the leave goes, and the longer the leave goes, the more likely that the leave will go even longer. And we'll talk about that in the next slide, because that's a principle of claims management. And finally, all of this, wrap it up. Any process you ever do in HR or business for that matter, you never leave it unevaluated. This isn't so much about an evaluation thing. This is about the endless cycle, right? This is about the endless cycle, like I said in the first point, the never-ending circle that is disability management. You're likely always going to have, if you're a medium to large size company especially, you're always going to have somebody on a leave of absence, right? You should, on a monthly basis, be reviewed. Set aside an hour, once a month, 1 hour, to go over everybody you have on leave of absence, where they are, when they were called last, when they provided their medical, when you're going to call them next, when you expect them back, prepare for their accommodation and return to work, right? That should happen on a monthly basis. I promise you, it could save you in the position of the government that I work for, the county, the municipal government I work for. We went from a near, like, this is just workers' compensation. This isn't even all of it. We went from we had to pay into near, which is a WSIB fund for those people from Ontario, a bigger company that know. We paid into near over $150,000 a year. Within 2 years, we were getting $70,000 back. That's a $220,000 swing. You can actually save your company money by using disability management. Key considerations. This is an important slide because that was kind of the steps, the process that you need to put in place. This is about the key considerations, the fundamentals of disability management that you really need to be aware of and you really need to adhere to. Okay, so communication and timing are critical. Obviously, I'm going to beat the dead horse. When you get the medical, how often you get the medical, super important. Communication, and I'm going to say this one time and probably say it 50 more times in our webinar series over the years that we do this. Communication is on you. I'm empathetic for employers. Don't get me wrong. And anybody who I talk to through our advisory services and consulting and all of that, that I'm an employer rep. I'm on your side, but I can't repeatedly say over and over again, when the employee doesn't reach out to you, that does not mean you get a free pass. You're the employer. You're held to the standard. You have the bar. You have the obligation. So when an employer doesn't reach out to you, reach out to them. And at that point, remind them of their obligation. And it is an obligation, and that'll be the next point, to communicate with you in turn. But you need to make sure that you keep that communication open. And again, most of the time, this isn't going to be about meeting requirements. Most of the time, this is going to be that opportunity that I talked about. Your employees at their most vulnerable. This is going to be the opportunity for you to work with your employee and make sure they get through this and get back to work. I guarantee they might tell a couple of employees about how great the process was when they went on a protected leave, or they went on a sick leave, or they went on a workers' comp, and how awesome the HR people or the company were. That's great. A couple of employees know, great for company culture. If their process is poor, they're going to tell a lot of people. They're going to tell a lot of people at your workplace. So this is an opportunity, but it's also a liability. We'll talk about that again. So again, cooperation, important. I just mentioned that when you're communicating with your employees and it is your obligation and you have to take that on as the final burden. And I said, remind your employees that they need to communicate back. That's in fact what you need to do. Like, it has to be made clear from the beginning of a process, whether you go into the asking for medical, then you go into the getting them back to work, then you go into the return to work plan, which may require accommodation. It needs to be clear to the employee at every point that you have a legal obligation as an employee under the Human Rights Code and the Occupational Health and Safety Act or code, under both pieces of legislation. You have a legal obligation to cooperate, and at any point you do not cooperate, you can lose entitlement and or discipline up into termination, right? So that's the good claims management service, good disability management services doesn't know how just to use the carrot, they know how to use the stick. And it's important because one doesn't work without the other. That's the world we live in. You guys all know that about me. So get the employee back to work. there's two things. This point and the next point are super important on any claims manage disability thing, especially when it comes to workers' comp. There is a stat that after 8 weeks of an employee being off work, the idea that they would get back to work within the next month is about 20% less than if they got back before the 8 weeks. The longer someone stays off work, the longer they're going to be off work. Once they get to 6 months, that stat goes to about 50% that they'll be back within a year. The longer someone is off work, the longer they will be off work. One, because they get scared of the workplace. Two, there's a stigma. Like absolutely, someone that's been out of the workplace that long, there's a stigma about them coming back and how they're going to be treated and how they're going to be treated by management and their coworkers and all these people that did all these other work for them and et cetera. And three, and this is just the way it is, especially as generations go down, they get comfortable. Do you know what I mean? There's something comforting about being at home and collecting even 60% of your income or 40% of your income than having to go to work every day and do the grind. So it's super important that the key of any disability management program is one, get them back to the workplace as possible. And two, everything you do in your disability management program should be about moving forward. You should never have a medical note that says, yeah, we'll reassess in 3 months. Not acceptable. You go back to your employee and say, that's not acceptable. I need a reassessment within 4 to 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what type of illness or injury it is. You always have to be able to check in, and there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. There's sometimes, especially when you're dealing with medical professionals that know this game on the other end. Most don't, but a lot do. So they know this game on the other end and they know what to say and what to write and what not to say and what not to write. So there's always going to be an exception to the rule, but you're always pushing your workers back to work. You're always pushing them forward. It should never be a stale process. You do a return to work plan. The return to work plan is a 4-week check-in. After those 4 weeks, you get new medical, you improve the goals. Okay, so we have a return to work plan. You're working at 60% capability, you're working 60% of the time. 4 weeks comes, now you're working at 80% of the capability and 100% of the time. 6 weeks comes, now you're back to work full capacity, full time. That is a principle of the disability management. And every time you move up the goal, you get them back for that 20%, or you get 20% more capabilities out of them. You're saving your company money, tangible cash, right? So it's super important. And then finally, the employer, begging your pardon, I type out, again, IT and editing, not my thing. But the employer has a duty to accommodate. So again, this is and again, empathy, 100% for my clients and all employers in general. This is not a maybe we can accommodate, or you know what, it really doesn't suit us, or we don't like accommodation, because if you can accommodate, you have to. And if you ever get called to the mat, and I'm dealing with this for a couple of clients right now who are going through human rights claims, if you ever get called to the mat by human rights, it is not a pleasant or not costly process. And if you could accommodate and you didn't, you have no defense. So it's really important, again, getting those accommodations and return to work plans in place in advance. It's really important that you do that. So when you get to the point of accommodation, if you really can't accommodate, you could justify it. You have all the paperwork, you have all the processes, you have the plans. You just couldn't do it because the medical didn't bear out what you had laid out. So if it's there in advance, it'll serve you better on the back end. And you'll see there a formal return to work. I call it early and safe return to work, is referred to by WSIB in Ontario. A formal return to work plan with steps that gets them back to work full time, whether it be injury, illness, protected leave in some sort of cases when they have childcare obligations and things of that nature. These are all things that you should have in place. I'm just going to check out what we're doing for time. Sorry, because when I got this slideshow up, I can't see my clock. We're at 2:20. So yeah, we're over a little bit. So I'm just going to do this slide. I'm not going to do the medical slide because we've done it a million times, but I'll leave it on there. You have it when it's sent out to you. These are the pitfalls that you have to be aware of in this process. Okay. And this is why, quite frankly, this process, disability management, is the most dangerous and litigious process of everything that we do in HR. Terminations, whatever. Go to court, go to tribunal, settle it, pay what you have to pay, done. Move on. Do you know what I mean? When you come to things that involve human rights, the can of worms, the proverbial risk for you as an employer or an HR person is significantly higher. You have to be aware of your obligations under the Human Rights Code, and you have to be aware of what a protected status is and when a protected status applies. Disability is a protected status. Even if someone's off work for 2 weeks, that is categorized as a disability under the Human Rights Code. If someone comes in and they're hammered, or they're under the influence of cocaine or prescription drugs or whatever, and then you ask them, do you have an issue? And they say, yes, that is a disability under the Human Rights Code. You have to be aware of what your obligations are and responsibilities are when it comes to human rights, not only in your written policy, but in your actions, how you first confront the employee, how you manage the claim, and how you get back to work. At every step in this process, human rights is a consideration. I don't want to say you need to be an expert in it, but you have to be cognitive that this is something that can bite you and cost you a lot of money. Claim costs. This is pretty self-explanatory. I've talked about it throughout the presentation. The longer someone's off, the more it's going to cost you. The quicker you get them back, the less it's going to cost you. That's your value as an HR person. If you're an employer, like a general manager or a CFO or an owner of a business on this presentation, there's your value in claims management, right? This is a process that will save you money. It can technically, depending on where you want to WSIB and workers' comp, depending on what jurisdiction you are, it can actually make you money with rebates and what have you. Privacy, you have to know when you're dealing with medical, you have to know what you can and can't ask. One. Two, you have to know who you could say what and what not to. So if you're doing a return to work circumstance or accommodation circumstance, obviously there's certain people that need to be aware of the worker who's coming back from this medical leave. They need to be aware of their they need to be aware of the restrictions, their capabilities, et cetera, what they can and cannot do. You have to be able to know who to tell and who not to tell, right? Super important. Further, and I've said this on prior webinars, it should be known that there's only one or two people max, and the second person, if there is a second person, is the fill-in for the first that is allowed to handle, receive, and store medical information. It does not go in your personnel file. It does not. It's a violation of all privacy legislation across Canada. It must be in a separate file, distinct from all the personnel stuff, and it must be handled by one person, only one person only. And then, of course, they would have a delegate, right, in their place. So that's super important. Even when you are doing an accommodation or return to work, you just don't hand over the FAF. You don't do that, right? You tell the people what they need to know and nothing more. So that's important. Liability, we spoke through it all. We spoke through it all about anytime when I talk about those different steps about what you need to do in the disability management process, anytime you don't do any of those steps, then you put yourself in a position of liability. And again, it's not like a termination where it's just going to cost you an extra month or two. If you screw up in this process, not only could it cost you an extra month or two, it could cost you irreparable harm to your company culture. It could cost you embarrassment, reputation to your company, because if you go to human rights and you go through to the end of the tribunal and then you lose, they post it. They put it in the news. So there's a lot of liability around this process. I'm sorry to have to scare you. Here's the good thing is if you do it properly and you're there for your employees at their most vulnerable time, this is an opportunity. Every bad thing that always happens is always an opportunity to fix it and make it better. This is one of those cases where when you have somebody who's going on a maternity leave and you get out, you call them up and say, congratulations, that's awesome. Here's the instructions about how to fill out EI. We're going to follow up with you in a month's time, see how it's going. The baby's born. Oh, you know what? Congratulations, the baby's born. That's awesome. A month before they're about ready to come back to work. Hey, it's a month before you're just checking in to make sure everything's okay. Is there anything we can do for you? Can we prepare for your return to work? All of that. All of these things, and that's a protected leave. That's not even a medical leave or a workers' comp leave where you have even more opportunity because it's a little bit more tragic for the employee. In this case, it's a happy time. So treat it as a happy time. But being there, the disability management process is a real opportunity to increase company culture, but it's also an opportunity to destroy it. So that's super important. Again, this is a slide I'm not going to go through because you've all saw it. Basically, what this slide says is that you are entitled to appropriate medical information. A doctor's note that says shall not work for 2 weeks or shall not work for 2 months for medical reasons is not something you're required to accept. Long and short, you're entitled to restrictions, capabilities, prognosis, all of those things which you get out of an FAF, functional abilities form. For anyone who's been on our prior webinars, we've done a couple of them because they're our most well attended about medical. You would have received or requested a functional abilities form. If you did not get one, by all means, email in, or or when the account manager calls, you have to follow up about how you did or how you liked the webinar, or you get an email. I don't know how that works. I'm not on that end. Make sure you request it. We'll get that to you. It's a form you have to have. The one I developed is one that I developed a long time ago and I've morphed over years to suit case law. It's effective. It's everything you need, but it's also nothing more than you're required to get. So it's safe. All right. So that's it. Now here's the offer. Okay, so I'm really excited about this. This is a product that we just developed. We have it with a few of our clients, with our larger clients. We have this and we typically do it on retainer, which we can do. But what this is, it's a claims where we do your disability management service for you. So typically, with the few clients we've done it thus far, the startup cost is $12.80. Right. So what that gets you is about 30 to 40 custom made letters, no matter at every stage in the process of every type of leave. We have a letter. We have a letter to go to the doctor. We have a letter to go to the short-term insurance policy. We have a letter to go to we have all these different letters to go to every person that is involved in every type of leave at every stage of every process. That's all developed for you. Right. That typically is something we charge $1,280 for. You're registered to this webinar. It's a cost of $199. That's it. It's a one-time cost. Doesn't cost you another thing. There's no more commitment after that. If you want to pay the $199 to get the templates, that's yours. Thereafter, we charge a per claim fee. So if you want us to do, if you have accommodation, if you have an employee that's going off on leave and it's a medical leave and you want us to do it, it's a one-time fee. If you want us to do something for someone's going on a protected leave, it's a one-time fee. Again, if you're a larger employer and you have a lot of people that do go on leave of absences on occasion, we can always work out a monthly cost where we just do it for you. We're your disability management piece. We are in essence in that one slide that I was telling you about. We are in essence your one point of contact. We are your intake. We are your outtake. We manage the claim. If it's a human rights issue, we deal with human rights people. If we have to call up the doctor, we call up the doctor. You do nothing. You basically, you tell us when they go on leave. We keep you informed throughout the course of the leave. We get them back to work. If they need an accommodation, we work with you to put the accommodation in place. There you go. It's like, it's basically like we are your disability management person for you at an incredibly inexpensive cost with this promotion. So you'll all get a copy of that. If you want to hear more about it, just call in, ask to book an appointment with me. I'll run you through everything that it entails. Even, and it doesn't matter if you decide to move forward with it, just so you know that it's out there. We have a lot of clients that use this as a one-off as well. They have a difficult accommodation process. They don't want to deal with it. They don't feel like they have the expertise to it. They don't want to have to get a lawyer. So they call us up and, can you do a one-off for us? Absolutely. So this is it's an exciting offer that I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and said, I want to do this. And then Sony, who did a great job on the slide, put it together. So yeah, so I hope everybody, it's again, high-end macro. I went over a little bit. I apologize. I get excited about this topic. I hope everybody enjoyed the webinar. I hope that you took at least something from it. If nothing at all, I'd be disappointed. But that's HR. We get disappointed on occasion. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A session after, and happy to answer all your questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Darcy. And so everyone knows the webinar is being recorded. If you registered and you're here, you will get a copy of it, I believe, on Monday morning. And going back to what Darcy said, if you want the FAF form, just when you get the recording for the webinar, you can just hit reply and say, please send me the form, and we will. Okay, lots of questions. Let's get into it. Okay. Who is responsible for claims management if you have short-term or long-term disability coverage for the employees?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so much is that there's a general confusion about that. When you hire a third party to take on your claim, like when you do your benefits to run your entitlement for your employees, it's actually the short-term disability company or the long-term disability company, usually one and the same, that is the one that's actually managing the disability claim. So they manage it from beginning to end. You would be remiss, however, and in that one slide that I put up, and I forgot that I even put it there, I didn't mention it. I said, when you do your monthly review, that includes your claims on LTD and STD. So when we do monthly reviews for clients, when we do disability management for clients, we reach out to the STD or LTD, the insurance. We reach out to them routinely once a month to get the update on the status of the claim. We're paying them, right? They work for us. So when we work out, we reach out to them and say, listen, we have all these claims. This is where, can you give us an update on all these different claims? They typically send us a spreadsheet or an email if it's only 1 or 2 people. And then we update it and we update the employer. You as a company, if you're going to do that yourself, that should be something that's, even though they're managing the claim, you ultimately have input and the final decision in some cases, how that goes. But you don't have that if you're not reaching out to your insurance provider on a regular basis.
Okay. Can we verify when an employee on maternity leave is planning to come back? Can we ask them to come back sooner?
Okay. Yes, you can reach out. you have to be careful about that. It's if you're doing it in a positive way, it's fine. So if you're reaching out just to say, like I suggested in the webinar, if you're reaching out just to say, hey, I noticed that you're ready to come back in about a month. Just want to make sure everything's okay. Is that still the date you want to come back on? All that kind of stuff. That's fine. Can you ask them to come back sooner? You could nicely say, listen, as long as you premise it by saying there's absolutely no, we have no power to do this for you. If you would like to come back sooner, we could really use you, but no pressure. That's up to you. Otherwise, if I don't hear back from you, and that's the best way to leave it, we'll just assume you're coming back on this date. But that's
Okay.
you want to push
Main thing is don't mess with pregnant women. It could be bad.
it. Exactly.
Okay. We have an employee who had a follow-up medical appointment and never provided us with an updated medical note. What are our next steps?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm glad it was asked because it goes to my point about communication in the presentation. They were supposed to provide you. They went to the doctor. They were probably even told, giving you the person asking the question the benefit of the doubt, because 90% of the time you do. They were probably told when you go to that, here's your updated form, have it filled out, give it back to me. They didn't do it. You just have to communicate with them and say, listen, we asked you to fill out the form. You had your doctor's appointment. We need this form filled out. If you have to go back, that's your problem, not ours. We gave you advance notice, and you have that right. You want to give a little bit of latitude for the healthcare system and how that works. But most of the time in a case like that, if the person calls in and says, I was at the doctor's office, and let's give the employee the benefit of the doubt, I forgot to get the form filled out. Can I send it in, and can the doctor please fill it out for you? They will do it. It doesn't require another doctor's appointment. Most the medical doctors are actually become better that way, especially now that they're charging for these things. So they're charging for everything, charging for prescription refills, everything. So you could feel better about asking a doctor for certain things now that they know they're getting paid for it. But yeah, just you have to take the onus, you have to take the reins of the ship proverbially, and tell them that, we need this form, and that's a requirement of your continued absence.
Okay, great. Thanks, Darce. With your disability management services at HR Covered, how do you communicate with the employer?
That's actually a really good question, because that's something we've been working through, because every employer is a little bit different. We do have some employers that have a system where they track their employees and all that kind of stuff. We won't actually get right into your system unless it's like quick and easy, user friendly. But what we do is we provide the information that your system needs. So if you have certain fields that your information, and you want to have it updated monthly, and you could give us a screenshot or a copy or whatever of the fields that you need, we will provide all the information on a monthly basis about, where you're at and all things. For employers that don't have like those types of systems, we actually work at a cadence with our employers. So when they first come on board, we sit down, we have a conversation about what we do, how we do it, and basically we say every time there's an important update, and here's what an important update looks like, you're going to hear from us. But do you want to hear from us on a regular basis? In addition to some of our clients that we do this with, they only want to hear the important stuff. They literally say, we're paying you to do this. Tell us what we need to know. I don't want to hear anything more. There are a few clients that do, again, and most of them are system based, do want to hear on a monthly basis so they can update their system. And that's never a bad thing either.
Okay, so are we allowed to communicate with an employee on medical leave? And if so, how often?
Yes, you can communicate with an employee on medical leave, and you can do so as often as necessary. The as necessary thing will have a lot to do with what's dictated by the medical note, right? And the type of illness or injury it is. So if you get a properly filled out functional abilities form, because I'm working under the premise that everyone here by now knows that they're not accepting doctor's notes. So if you get a properly filled out functional abilities form or something similar to it, it's going to say the date of the next visit. And if it doesn't, so as long as it's not out too long, like it shouldn't be more than 8 weeks. Unless you have like something terminal or something of that nature, and even in that case, it typically is not more than 8 weeks. A doctor's recurring visit for any illness or an injury should never be more than 8 weeks. Most of the time, it's 4 weeks, oftentimes 6. So that's when you should be reaching out, just a gentle reminder. And this is what we would do. I'll tell you our process. If we know a person's going to we have a return to doctor date in our software. If we know that's happening, we have it alerts us 2 days before they go to the doctor. We reach out to the employee and say, by the way, just a reminder, we know you're going to the doctor in 2 days. Here's your form. Please have that filled out. Same thing for employees.
Right. Our long-term provider, our long-term disability provider wants us to return someone to modified duties, but we don't feel that they're ready. Do we have a say here?
You absolutely have a say. Now, this goes back to what we were talking about when you have an accommodation plan or an early and safe return to work plan in place. That gives you more legs to stand on with the STD or LTD company. It's important because it took me a while, like out of the gate, when I was like young and raw at this. Now I'm just old and what I don't know, I don't even know the other one. But when I was young and raw at this, it took me a while to really appreciate the fact that whether it be workers' compensation, WSIB, Canada Life, Sun Life, whomever, whatever. At the end of the day, they're all insurance companies. What do insurance companies not like to do? Pay money. When they're on their system, they're paying them. We're not. So of course, they're going to want to push them back as quickly as they can. You as an employer have every right to say, we're not able to accommodate. We can't do that. And the biggest thing is that when they try to push them back and say, well, this person can work at 60% of their duties, but we're going to push them back to work 100%. And, you can work it out. It's like, no, we're willing to accept them back at 60% and we'll pay 60% of their wages. You pay the other 40%. Right. So it never, and again, I don't want this to be salesy, so I'll stop it. But that's something we do if we're your disability management provider. We actually get on the phone and argue with the insurance company. So you just tell us we can't take them back. We'll confirm with you that, in fact, you cannot take them back. We'll get on the phone and argue with your insurance company for you as part of the flat fee. But as an employer or an HR person out there doing it yourself, you have absolutely every right to advocate for yourself and your business.
Okay, we have an employee who received a medical note. Let me start again. We have an employee who brought us a medical note saying that they must work from home. Are we required to follow this?
No, we get this all the time, and we've discussed this. This question comes up in every webinar we do on medical. So because this is a very common thing anymore. We get it at least 3 or 4 times a week where we get this note. Basically, at the end of the day, the only thing you're required to follow is the restrictions and capabilities. So if you get an FAF that comes back, if you get a medical note saying, again, I'm going to go backwards a little bit, saying that must work at home for the next foreseeable future, and that's all it says, you send it back with the functional abilities form. Like I won't say that anymore because I'm going to just assume that's assumed. On that functional abilities form, oftentimes what happens is they leave the capabilities and restrictions blank, or the medical doctor checks off fully capable of doing these things, no restrictions, but I suggest that they work from home for the next month. If they did check off everything, then you could say you have no restrictions and capabilities. So the fact that your doctor suggested that you work from home, that's nice. If they're paying you, then that's fine. But seeing as we're paying you and the doctor's not paying you, we expect you in the office tomorrow because your medical doctor gave you a medical form that said you have no restrictions and you're 100% full capabilities. We need you back. Completely within your right. If that area is blank, I would take the same approach. Absolutely 100%. And if the employee starts to argue with you, then you say, okay, that's fine. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Go get the form filled out properly. Send them back to the doctor and say, we need the restrictions and capabilities. Elsewise, we do not have medical evidence to support the fact that you need to work from home. Ergo, you're coming into the office tomorrow.
Okay, so if it is filled out fully and it does say that this person does need to work from home, then is that enforceable?
If the restrictions are as such, so what you're going to get in a circumstance like that, and there's only 1 or 2 cases where I've been compelled to say to a client, yeah, you're not going to win here. Like you're just not going to win, is when you got, capable of handling, because on the FAF that we do, it's like capable of handling their emotions. Yes. Capable of, concentrating. Yes. Capable of working with others cooperatively. No. That's the way. Hopefully you don't, if there's employees on here, don't go and run and tell your doctor this is how you get around it. But those are the types of questions you have when you write a functional abilities form and you develop one. It has to be developed in such a way that it's not so biased to the employer that the doctor has no other chance to, provide medical information that would aid the employee. So that's why you have to have those questions on there, because one, it gives you a good indicator of what they can and can't do. But if they're capable of their tasks, they're capable of working. If they're capable of handling their emotions, they're capable of working. If they're not capable of cooperating or, acting good with others, they may not be capable of working in a workplace with other people and they might need to work from home. And if that accommodation is available, again, going back to what you must do and what you don't want to do, if it's possible for you to have that job done from home, even though the employer doesn't like it, then in a case like that, you're likely going to have to do that. But you're not going to want to make it easy. on your employee. You're going to want send it on the FAF. It says, has this person been referred to a specialist, to someone else, that could help them with that? And if the answer is no, say, okay, we'll do this for 2 weeks to a month. We want you to go back next time you go back to your doctor. We're going to highlight this part and say, why haven't you been referred to a specialist? This is not going to be, again, everything about claims disability management. Move forward, get them back into the workplace. Not get them back to work necessarily, get them back in the workplace. So you highlight that thing and even write a note to the doctor. Can you tell me why this has remained static and this person hasn't been seen to refer to a specialist, right? Most doctors at a certain point, they get concerned about their liability in these cases too. So because they have obligations as well to, push the, yeah.
That's great. Employees on medical leave. She's under an accommodation plan, working 4 hours a day, 3 days per week. She has not come to work for 4 days for the past 2 weeks. And I have just found out she's working another job. How do I approach this?
Yeah, if you can prove the fact that she's working another job, then this doesn't become a claims management thing. This becomes a breach of trust. So unless she can show somewhere along the way that, one, like if you find out she's working that other job when she was supposed to be working yours, that's breach of trust, and you may very well have reason for a for-cause termination. So this is beyond the realm of, claims management. But if you want to swing it back to claims management, if she's not working that job during the period of time that she should have been working for you, and she's doing it on the hours when she shouldn't have been, she would need to provide some type of medical why she can do that job and not yours. And if you can't get that medical, then again, you might either have reason to call her back to work 100% full time. The accommodation is now null and void, and you may want to discipline on top of that, or you may want to terminate with cause. So there's a lot of different options. If you are a client of HR Cover, because I know a lot of our clients attend this, make sure you call in. We'll run through that with you, because there's a lot there, but you have a lot of options.
What are our responsibilities or legal implications when we hire someone with epilepsy? Now, this person's based in BC, but just in general.
You would have to accommodate to the up to the point of undue hardship. So, obviously whenever another reason you would get a functional abilities form is when someone discloses to you that they have some type of disability or some type, what have you. And then you would say, okay, is there, we got to find out if there's any restrictions that come with that. Make sure your capabilities are where we need you to be. So when you hire someone, again, keeping in mind, because we get this question often, you are not required to disclose a disability or an illness in the hiring process. It's a violation of the Human Rights Code to ask someone to do so. Once they're there, if they disclose it to you after the fact and thereafter ask for accommodation, or you figure they're going to need it, then you have to provide it up into undue hardship. The bar for undue hardship is basically you will lose your business. Like you will go into the black or whatever it is if you accommodate this person, right? So if you can afford it, you have to provide it. And if it's in a plant or an industry or somewhere where there's driving or something of that nature, and it's a health and safety issue, and that's the reason you can't accommodate, that's different. But 90% of the time, it's a cost thing. And if you're a small or large business in Canada, undue hardship doesn't play out, so you're obligated to accommodate, and you're going to need the appropriate medical to make that determination.
If you have a staff member that has submitted a medical note for a 6-month leave, are you still checking in every 2 weeks?
No, not for if it's a 6-month leave, it depends what kind of leave it is.
Yeah.
So like, if it's a leave of absence, if it's just an approved leave of absence, like it has nothing to do with medical or anything of that nature, then you can just check in when they get close to coming back, right? Because they're not giving you, there's no reason, there's no nexus for it. Maybe they're going on sabbatical, whatever it is. You approved it, so you don't have a problem with it. Check a month or 2 weeks prior to when they're coming back to make sure they're coming back. If it's a leave of absence, like a medical leave, and it's a 6-month duration, I'd be checking in every 4 to 6 weeks. Again, when I mentioned how often you would check in, it has to do with why you're off and then the length of time you're off. If you're going to be off, if you got appropriate and satisfactory medical, so the 6 months is warranted because that's a long time to be in, like to predetermine that you're going to be in a leave, then there's a reason for it. There would have been something profound that will cause them to be off predetermined that long. So there's not a lot you can do by checking up every so often. But again, opportunity, check in every 6 to 8 weeks, just checking in, see how things are going. I just want to keep you in the loop. Give them an update about the workplace. Do you know what I mean? Give them an update about, what's going on with P&L or whatever it is that you decide to share as a company. And, do you have any questions about what's going on? That's an opportunity to stay in touch with somebody who's probably legitimately off for a good reason if it's that long. But yeah, it'll always vary on how long and what reason the leave is, the reason for the leave.
Just want to say that's a really nice dress shirt there.
Yeah. Everybody's got to go. We go to conferences and stuff like that. And I think I have 2 dress shirts that I rotate from conference to conference. So I think Brett's just like really impressed that I actually went and bought something new that doesn't, doesn't have a hole in it or something.
Did
I
you
have
walk into the store? Did you actually go in the store?
so I lasted all about 2 minutes. I found the first 3 shirts. I grabbed the first the rack. I tried 3 on. I bought 2 of them. I walked out. I was there for 5 minutes. It's about as much as I could tolerate shopping.
That's impressive. That's why you always go shopping with a list and know what you want, right? Get in, get it done. All right, back to HR. You look great though. I have an employee that is off on leave now, not picking up calls, bringing generic notes, but not completing the FAF that was sent to him. Sent email and registered mail are also coming back unclaimed. What can I do now?
Go down the job abandonment process. You're entitled to appropriate and satisfactory. And whenever you see me in a webinar, I always put quotation marks around it because that is from one of the prevalent court cases on the matter. Appropriate and satisfactory medical means restrictions, capability, prognosis. If they're not giving it to you, you send them the first letter saying, we've requested this from you. Well, first you tell them in the letter, we're entitled to this. This is not an option. Then you say, we've requested it from you and you list the dates. And we've sent you registered mail and it's been returned like this. If you do not provide it by this date, you will proceed to the next step in the job abandonment process. You don't receive it by that date, you move to the next step in the job abandonment process, which is same letter, if we don't receive it by this date, you will be terminated for job abandonment which is without cause, no notice, no pay in lieu of notice. And then the third step is the actual termination letter with cause, no payment, no notice. There's a chance. And at the end of that termination letter, here's the nuance. And I learned this the hard way back when I was doing unions and all that kind of stuff on the daily. There's always a chance that the employee can come back after you've terminated them through that process and say, here's my medical. I go, the fact that I didn't provide it to you, that's not a reason to terminate me for job abandonment. It always, the reason was always there. You shouldn't have done it that way. So now after every termination letter for job abandonment, I put the caveat at the bottom, in italics, in larger font. Should you provide appropriate and satisfactory medical at a later date after you receive this letter, we may reconsider the decision, handed down in this letter. At which point, if they do, I'll hire them back. That covers you from a human rights claim, right? Because it puts the onus back on them. They're terminated, but it puts the onus back on them. If they do come back with appropriate medical, and this happened to me twice in the last year or so, I've actually recommended the client hire them back and then discipline them. And both times they did discipline them. And one of the times it was, again, a union setting, they grieved it and we won. Discipline them for not following the process and not cooperating in the disability claims process, which again, as I reminded everyone in the process or in the webinar, is an actual legal obligation of the employee. And the union knew that in that case. They had to side with the employee, but they knew it at the end. So that's why we didn't get a lot of kickback on the grievance.
Yes. If employee submits a generic doctor's note and refuses to have the company FAF completed, it's a similar question. What are the restrictions that we have to start the termination process by emailing them and giving them 3 letters saying they are in danger of losing their job? Can they sue us saying they provided a doctor's note stating they are off for 1 month? A similar question.
It's literally the same answer. It's the job abandonment process in any discipline. In any discipline, it's really important that the first discipline, especially, always starts with the backbone, the premise of power for which you have, the obligation for which the employee must follow. So the letter must state, we are legally entitled to this information, and spell it out for them. Appropriate and satisfactory medical means, restrictions, capabilities, and prognosis, all of which are included in this form. Failure to provide what we're legally entitled to may result in job abandonment, which is termination with cause without working notice or pay, and then go into the deadlines, go through that process. And then when you do the termination, the caveat at the bottom, which protects you from that lawsuit or human rights claim, and you're fine. You can't in HR, and I tell my clients this all the time. I can never say 100% that you're not going to get sued. There's employee. I've been we've offered employees gratuitous amount of termination pay and still got sued just because they're pissed off about being terminated. And that's the nature of what I do for a living, right? The nature of all of what you do for the most part, the HR people on the call, the nature of what we do for a living. We can't guarantee outcomes. We could just mitigate our outcomes to the most of 10%. That process that I outlined for you is as strong as it gets.
What if a doctor says return to work 5 days, but the employee says they only want to do 3 days and we need them back for 5 days? What do we do?
I'm gonna go back for 5 days. That's the gift. That's the gift that never stops giving. When you have a medical saying, hey, you could be here for 5 days, and the employee says, I want to go back for 3, I go, that's great that you like to self-diagnose. I don't care. Your doctor said you could be here 5 days, be here 5 days. You don't even need to do job abandonment for that. They just don't come back 5 days, you just fire them.
All right. Okay. Can you place an employee on a performance enhancement plan after a disability claim? What are your recommendations? How long should you wait before implementing it?
Right. So this is a good question because there's a little bit of a nuance to it. If they have performance issues before the disability claim and you have it documented somewhere, like you have an email going back and forth, you had started the performance management process, anything to that regard, you're in a decent spot. You're just simply picking up before you went. The paradigm or the timeline, if you will, what a human rights person, a lawyer is going to look at, what I'm going to look at when I'm asking my clients these questions, is if I draw a line from the disability to the time when you either terminate them, put them on a performance management plan, whatever it is that you're going to be doing. If I draw a line and the only thing I see between the time they started with you and the time you performance manage them is a disability, that I'm going to make the assumption, as a third party likely would, that the disability is the reason you're doing the performance management. In that same line, if I see on the other end of the disability that there was performance management issues noted, or a process had already started, or termination had started, then I can point back to that and say, it's not the disability, it's that the disability is irrelevant and circumstantial. So if they had something prior, then they'll be in a good spot. If they didn't have anything else, no matter what you do, no matter how much time you wait in between the disability and the performance improvement plan, you're gonna take on some liability. You can't stop somebody from claiming discrimination or retribution going on leave. But typically, you want to wait at least 2 or 3 months out. Just on the basis this person's coming from a disability claim, no different than a probation period. You want to give them time to prove themselves, get back in the flow, blah, 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 blah. So that's why I typically recommend the 3 months out. But again, anytime you do that, when you never had anything on file prior, you're taking on a risk.
Yeah. Should we be asking for an updated FAF every time an employee has a follow-up appointment with their doctor?
Assuming it's not on a week-to-week basis, then, if it's on a week-to-week basis, then maybe not. But, if it's what is typically reasonable is every couple of weeks, every 3 to 4 weeks maximum, then yeah, every time they go back to the doctor in FAF, it's super important for accommodation. And it's also super important if you ever want to terminate the employee, but you always need a baseline. Like when you get the hardcore disability management, which is where I came from, when you're working with workplace injuries and manufacturing and transportation and road work and crap like that, you want a baseline. You want to see where this person is at 100%. You want to know where they are at 80%. You want to be able to show over time in these really heavy, intense industries that this person's physical ability has decreased over time to the point where you can no longer justify them being there. And when you do have to let them go, you don't get terminated for age discrimination or disability or whatever. You could show the medical, you could show the progression of what is all human beings. If you're going to be swinging a sledgehammer 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, after 20 or 30 years, you're not going to be able to swing so hard or fast, right? And after a certain point, they just can't do the job anymore. It's really important to, even within a claim, to be able to find a baseline of someone's capabilities and where they're at. That's a little bit more advanced, and it usually applies more to manufacturing and, again, heavy work industries, but it still pertains to the common white collar office space workplace.
We have an employee that calls in sick on a weekly basis. He's used up all of his sick days and currently takes 6 days as unpaid. He does not provide doctor's notes, but claims he has a serious health concern. How do I address his continual absence without seeming insensitive?
Well, I get the insensitive thing. I was going to be my typical self, but I'm going to try not to be. But you really, it's not an issue. If this makes you feel better, it's not an issue of being insensitive. You should never allow an employee to self-diagnose. You just shouldn't. One, they might be snowing you, first off, so that could be one thing. Two, they might not be getting the help they need. Maybe they do have a serious illness, but they're not getting the help they need, and maybe this is their way of going around it. Or, but three, and this is the most important thing, it's your right. Continued poor absenteeism is not acceptable in the workplace. If it's due to an illness or an injury that necessitates that, then sure it is, but that's an accommodation. But you have to push this person and say, listen, we cannot continue on with the continued absenteeism. At the very least, it's disruptive. At the very worst, it forms a basis for pattern absenteeism, which could lead to termination with cause. We need you to provide us with medical information that states that you have, not a diagnosis, but we need you to say that, actually, how would you say, justifies the continued absenteeism. And if there is accommodation we can provide for you, we will provide it, but we need that medical information to do that. And unfortunately, until we get it, you can't be here. Because if you have a serious medical condition and you're coming to work, but you can't be to work on a regular basis, we don't know if you're putting your own health and safety in place. We have an obligation under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to protect you. That's our due diligence. So, that's the harshest way to do it. Hopefully you don't get to that point, but if you get to the point where you say, listen, if you don't provide us with the medical for reasons cited under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, we can't have you here, medical might just mysteriously appear.
Okay, we're almost out of time. Might be the last question. What happens if the employee says their doctor will not fill out the form we provided? What can we do?
I'm going to another doctor. I know that sounds like a jerk move, but it's
what else are you
like,
gonna do?
that's what I mean. Like, thank you. Like, what else are you going to do? You have the employee has an obligation to you. The doctor has an obligation to the client. The doctor does not have an obligation to the employer. So if the doctor does not want to do their obligation for their employee, which is fill out the appropriate medical, which is technically not ethical on their part, right? It's not ethical. Sorry if there's a medical person that's not ethical. So if they need this information to be able to work and be healthy in the workplace, they don't want to fill out that form. That's fine. That's their choice. They have no obligation to you, but the employee does have an obligation to you, and you have a legal right to this information. So you tell them, if you have to go to a walk-in, then go to the walk-in. We'll pay you for half a day. If you have to go to the emergency room, go to the emergency room. I guarantee you there's not a walk-in or an emergency room for the most part that is not going to fill out this form for you. Except, well, the emergency room maybe, but most walk-ins will fill it out for you. That's what they're there for in part.
Especially if you're getting paid to go online.
Yeah, like you don't have to pay them to do that because, again, it's their obligation. But I'm a big proponent of saying, hey,
Sure.
We'll meet you halfway here. Your doctor's acting in a way that I would consider to be inappropriate and unprofessional. Go to a walk-in. We'll pay you a couple of hours to go sit there and get that done and bring it back, and then we can work together cooperatively to get you back to work and get them out of
Well, and you also don't know, the person could just be bluffing and they never even went to their doctor. So it's like, hey, that's fine, but
never.
You need to go to the walk-in. Yeah, exactly. Darcy, that was great. We're pretty much out of time. 8 unanswered questions here. Apologize for not getting to them. But yeah, very interesting topic. As always, remember, this is being recorded. Everyone's going to get a copy of this. If you want, I think it was the FAF form, just reply to the recorded copy. We'll send it. That's going out on Monday. Thanks for sending the questions. Darcy, anything else that you wanted to say?
Oh, it's an exciting topic. I hope somebody took something away from it, but thanks for attending. We always appreciate you coming back, and for the new people coming, hopefully we'll see you again.
And looking forward to seeing your other 2 dress shirts for the next 2 webinars.
One other shirt. I took 2 of the 3, but I will wear the other.
Hey, that's pretty good. You went from 2 dress shirts to 4. That's a big increase.
Thanks for me.
Yeah, you look great. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye.